what we do this semester is build your capability. And then next semester, you actually are working in a team where you guys know what to do. That's the idea. Yeah. Where is my output? Optiplex. Let's see how this works. Where is my output? Yeah, that's good. It's working. Okay. It's the voice of God. Okay. Oh. Darn it. I knew I was doing something wrong. 1 second, guys. Just want to grab that. The YouTube link. Okay. I'm just off screen. I'm just updating your live link just in case you need to watch this later. All right, let's get moving on this. And welcome back. We are COMP2112. That's advanced client-side scripting, I like to call it that, in the fall 2022 semester at Georgian, and it's week 12 already, and this is part 1 of our video recording and all that stuff. We're sitting in week 12, and what I've done is I've moved around. I had assignment 1, 2, and 3. I moved around assignment 3. I'm going to talk about it today. It's going to be due by the end of semester, and let's talk about that right now before we move on. Okay. So what is it? It's another portfolio site. Yay, isn't that amazing? So why am I doing this? Why am I just giving you the same thing over and over again? This way you don't have to make more content, right? It's not about content here. It's about technology, right? So what I want you guys to do is I want you to make another version of your portfolio site with EJS and Express. So now this is where this is the bridge between this course and next semester. Now, for some of you are like, wait, I just did React, right? And now I'm going to go back to Express because Express is like not as good as React. Actually, it's not, right? But for me to give you an API with React and Express in 2 weeks is like, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot or maybe shoot myself in the head. That's how it's going to be. It's like, sorry to say it that way. I'm being facetious, of course. But what I'm saying is it's a lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to dial it back a bit. All right. So for Andres, I'm just looking at it going, he's puzzled. He's got this puzzled look on his face. He's like, why? Right? Because next semester is going to be with Node and Express. And I want you guys to have a little bit of an intro to that. So when you get into next semester, then Rich is going to give you other stuff that has nothing to do with this, right? You've already got an intro into Express. You've already got an intro into Node. You already have your TypeScript. You already have that stuff. And you have a bit of React. You had a bit of single page application stuff. So you know how that all works. You can identify what this is, and this is what we're doing. Express is another form of a single page application in many ways. That's what we're going to do, but with server-side routing instead of client-side routing, okay? So we have some stuff to do, a lot of work to do, and so we got to get to it as fast as we can. One thing is that your site, like always, needs to be live. I'm giving you a suite of possible options. I highly recommend Render because it's free, right? You can probably get it done in Azure or AWS or GCP and not a problem. And that might be fun to do, but I recommend render.com to make it simple. I'm still giving you 17 marks to rejig your content for Express, because again, you need to rejig it. There's some changes you need to make, to your HTML and stuff like that. And so I'm paying you for it, right, in marks, okay? So all the same stuff. There are It's slightly different. So I'm getting you to, instead of a bio page, please take a look. There is a logo, that's required. Some of you didn't include it in your assignment 1 or assignment 2. And please take a look when you do your projects and everything else, please take a look at the requirements I'm asking you to do. Some people are not fulfilling the requirements that I've asked you. So please do that. CSS and all that stuff can be the same, right? Because really at the end of the day, you're modifying pages with the same way. So that's where you say, if your contact page doesn't have to work, although it would be nice if you make it work, great. I'm not going to pay you extra for it. You need to use Express and Node. Okay, so that is one of the requirements. You can't use some other backend technologies, right? Now, here's where I'm going to say optional, right? If you're somebody like Advanced, right, and you want to use a front end other than Express EJS, and you want to combine for your own benefit, for your own experience, for your own fun, if you want to have another thing other than EJS with Express, you want to do an API, go. I'm okay with it if you want to do it. However, for the other people who are not so advanced, right, I recommend sticking with the EJS because it's very simple to do. It's integrated with Express, and there's a lot of stuff you need to do, right? So, but if you're someone who wants to challenge themselves, people who have already experience with Express and Node and all that kind of stuff, certainly you can do that. And I wouldn't take away marks if I said, well, you didn't use EJS. Of course you didn't, because React is better, right? So, I'm not going to take marks away, but I also want to make it doable for everybody else. And that's why I've said it's okay. Just use Express, and you're going to see how easy it is, much better to get going with this. It's a different paradigm. Okay, we've been working with a declarative paradigm with functional programming up until now, and Express uses a different kind of paradigm altogether. Okay, so that's the one thing to know. Okay, internal documentation as normal. One thing it talks about here, if you read the document a little bit, is that you're going to define routes, right? So we've already done client-side routing. Now we're going to do server-side routing. How does that look, for Express compared to how it looks with React? Well, you're going to see that it looks somewhat similar in some ways, right? And some differences that we're going to talk about as well. Share your files in GitHub as normal, and your cloud provider, YouTube, is a must as normal, and that's it. Okay, so that's worth 10% of your final grade. You can get going immediately today. I recommend you start it going as fast as possible, and I'll give you some hints on how to get going on it during our demo today, because we're going to kind of combine a little bit of, hey, what is Node, and then how to make Node easier with Express. Bang, we're getting it in there. Okay. So what Rich might do is when he sees you guys next semester, he might slow it down a little bit in the beginning and review what we've done this semester with Node and Express. And this way you can settle back into his requirements that are going to be more with Angular and Express as opposed to React and Express, like how we're doing it this semester. Okay. All right. So questions around assignment 3. Again, same content, different technology, all we're doing. You're still using TypeScript, you're still using JavaScript, you're still using everything else. There is no database requirement for this one. So there's no Mongo if you're someone who likes to use that kind of stuff. There's no Firebase. We kind of touched on Firebase a little bit to kind of talk about what that is. I want to show you the fix on Firebase today and what the issues were last week. Like I said, it's just straight, kind of making your stuff work on a different type of technology. And I think it's going to be a good experience for you guys to work into before you get into the next semester. So questions before we move on? How about concerns? Any concerns? For the people that are online, please, if you have a concern. Elena says, what is Express? We'll talk about that. Right? It's actually a lot of middleware modules, that basically are third-party modules that have been developed for Node.js to make Node.js easier. I'm trying to put it together in a nice way, right? So let's get moving. Okay, so if there's that's again, it's due. Content will be injected. You don't need to inject content. That was only for the first assignment. Okay, let's move on to the next piece. So that's that. All right. So last week we talked about completing some CRUD with React and Axios. We didn't get a chance to do it all, and it is what it is. And I just wanted to, before we move on to this week, which is an intro to Node, and I want to do a Node and TypeScript demo today. I wanted to talk about that. And also in-class exercise 9, just like normal, just your practice for the week is due on Sunday. Like every week we do it. So that way it gives you a chance to get into the code and work with it every week. Before we get into the meat and bones of our conversation, which is what is intro to Node, what is Node, let's talk about last week's project a little bit. So I'm going to bring up our project again. And remember, I worked with a different computer last time, so I need to kind of do a rebuild for this one. So again, I'm going to go to github.com, and I'm going to go to our project repositories here, and we're going to go into week 11, right? So I want to show you the fix. I've actually pushed it to GitHub, so you can always try it yourself, but I want to show you this. So let's do that now. And then just briefly, just so that we kind of finish off that part that was kind of maybe not perfectly done. So let's do that there. And so stuff that you should know and feel comfortable with doing is GitHub. But this semester, this is something that is an output for this semester. And you should feel more comfortable with using GitHub than ever. All right, so this is I've just cloned my project here. Refresh, there it is. Let's just rename this to week 11. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up Visual Studio Code and run it so you can see what this thing does. And like that. So just like always with React, as our final kind of send away to it, remember what we need to do with these projects is do a yarn install first. So whenever you do React, as an example, we need to do one of these. And then once it's been installed, we want to do a yarn start, right? It's going to take a second. Just going to bring this over there. And you can see how many thousands of files I have here on the project. By the way, that's one thing that I always, it always makes me, I don't know, weirds me out how many thousands of files we use that have nothing to do with us, right? It's like somebody else wrote these thousands of files and in the community, and we're just, riding along and using them, right? So, that's where I kind of don't like that part. Like I wish there was less, some way that it was kind of something we did. But then again, this is what we do when we program anyway. If we're using C++ or C# or Java or PHP or Python or whatever language, fill it in, right? We use thousands of files that we have nothing to do with in the background, right? And it always is daunting as a developer when you're like, and maybe even as a younger developer, I've heard for some people who are in school, they're like, can I ever do this? Can I ever contribute to the community and add my own files to those thousands of files that people can use in their projects, right? It's a tough thing to do, but it can be done if you're interested in being a contributor. But it takes dedication, and you need to focus on one technology at a time. So if you're thinking this is how it's going to be and you're a generalist, no, you need to be a specialist. Okay, at least my opinion. So now that we've got everything installed, let's do a yarn start. So to see what this looks like. And I'm also just being preemptive. I'm also going to bring up our Firebase connection, right? To show you how this is going to work. So I did some testing and I wanted to show you what this looks like. So one of the problems we had with Firebase was one day when this feels like going there. One of the problems we have with Firebase is that we tried to do a numeric collection of TV shows. And here what I've done is instead of making it numeric, I've changed it so that way it is hash code that I've kind of put together with an ID. Okay, so this is the recommended way of doing it. And the reason why I'm going to show you this is because once we go numeric, the problem with Firebase and numeric hash code, a numeric code like 1, 2, 3, 4, is how do you keep that up to date? There's a lot of maintenance, right? So this is where I was going to go this week if we had time. I was going to talk about how to make this, kind of now you can also auto generate. That's another thing you can do, right? There's challenges with that, with auto generation. And the problem with auto generation is it gives you really weird, kind of numbers. Positive about generating your own hash code, everything will appear potentially in your list alphanumerically. So almost like pre-sorted. It'll all be a sorted list automatically if you do your own hash code, right? If you generate a random hash code, it's however they enter it in is how you're going to see it, right? That's also a negative. Both ways are positives and negatives. Yes.
What do we use real time database to build Firestore?
I like Firestore a lot, but you're going to learn about Firestore in Rich's course. So I don't want. Yeah, Firestore is newer. Real-time database is older, and Firebase real-time database doesn't have collections. Firestore has collections, which is easier. Yeah, it's much easier. But that's why I'm getting you to do it with Rich. I'm getting you to do it with him. So that way, if he's going to do it, if he's going to cover that Firestore, that's fine. But I want you to know both, because when it comes to Android, if you're ever going to do an Android and iOS application, you're going to see some applications that use Firebase with real-time database, and you're going to see some that use Firestore. That's why. Okay. Underlying motives, but for most people, it's just if you think about this, it's a serverless database, right? That is up online. So so how do I make these? And what does this look like on the back end? And what is the result here? Well, if I go to Alex Taylor, if I go to TV shows now, you can see that I can add anything I want. So if I add a new TV show, and let's say called, The Bad. Okay, let's say I made it. I'm making this up. The Bad. All right, a new TV show about an apocalypse, like we've seen a million times, right? Or let's just say The Walking Dead. How about this? There's an apocalypse that ended with a bad ending. All right, and we know this is AMC, right? So if I add that in, the idea is that it's supposed to show The Walking Dead. Right here it is in AMC. That's how it works. So notice that it's in alphabetical order, right? Why? Because on the back end, what I've done is, and you can see here's what it is. Here's The Walking Dead in AMC. So what I've done is I've made my own hash, right? My own hash code. And I'm using the time in milliseconds since 1970, right? Which is a random number for us because, milliseconds keep marching on. That's what happens. And then the first letter of the title in caps and the first letter of the studio in caps, right, is the first two things. So again, it's going to be slightly different. So chances are you're not going to get the exact same code every single time. This is a very simple hash. There are much better ways of doing it. Like, for example, adding also a random number that is, 10 numbers long, right? That's that kind of stuff, right? And what this does is it produces a unique key automatically for you when you're adding into the database, but also an alphabetical key because it's based on the first two letters, right? So that's what it does. So now this is just a tactic Okay, I'm not going to say this is the only way to do it, and Andres just said it, using Firestore is even easier, right? But let's take a look at just what we did with a couple things we talked about in the previous weeks, just to finish off this module is what I want to try and do here. So from a services perspective, I modified the TV show database, data service, and we, instead of using post, I need to use put. And the reason why this is working the way it does is I'm using the API for real-time database. And the API needs put instead of post. It just needs that. That's the API, okay? And the way it works is you specify your parent object. That is, where is that? That is TV shows. That's the parent object, right? You specify the parent object, and then you specify the ID that you're modifying or you're adding, right? Modification, by the way, is the exact same, right? So again, if I think about that, the ID would be whatever the ID is, right? And then plus the data object that you want to change, which is data. And you have to add a .json because what's happening is this is the API, the way it works, where you kind of make a .json file that you are pushing to your Firebase. Okay, so that is the way that works. This is the same way. Notice I also made this in any type, but you could have made it an array of type, whatever you wanted, right? And just to show you the model class, that also had to change because my model class needs now to keep track of its own ID. If it keeps track of its own ID, then I can look at it and go, okay, I'm looking at this one, and then I can search for it by ID, modify it, and whatever. This is the easiest way to do it with real-time database, okay? Okay, so that is the way I did it. And in the view that I used, the TV shows list, just to show you this too, just to finish off, the view hasn't changed. Everything is the exact same, except for the way we iterate. Instead of using a, so I do the map here, right? As an example, here's the map that I'm using the same way. But when we collect and create our TV shows array, which is array of type any now, right? What I'm doing is I'm kind of going through and I'm creating my TV shows list, right? And I'm doing it by looping through each key inside of the database. So I'm using something called the object prototype, the object constructor, and the object has something called the keys method. And the keys method, if I read the Firebase database, it's going to give me keys, and the keys are the ID of everything that I'm getting. Okay, that's what's happening. I'm getting all the IDs, right? And then what I'm doing is instead of iterating, I'm going through each of the keys, and I'm recreating the data. I'm taking the data, recreating it, patching it onto the TV show list and putting it out on the thing. It takes a little bit of work, but it's a one-time cost, and it's always going to work great this way. So it doesn't matter if the key is numeric, alphanumeric, random, it doesn't matter. It's just going to read it, and it's going to, we're going to kind of post it on the thing, in the page. Okay. So that's how this thing works. And the add method, when I do the add, is almost exactly what we had before. That's the add method. And the only thing that I've done different with the add method is how I use the TV show list data service to create a new object. That's the only thing I'm doing differently, right? But for the most part, if you wanted to inspect the code, it's up online. Again, this is not our exercise for this week. I just wanted to finish off and show you that it can be done nicely and it looks pretty good. Okay. So we've done our first two. We've done read and create. We just didn't have a chance to finish off update and delete. And it's really not that bad after this. Once you can do create and read, update and delete, much easier. Okay. Although I have to say update is also a little bit of overhead. Okay, questions around this about the database. And Andres had a very good point. So what he said was, how come real-time database and not Firestore? Because Firestore is another option on Firebase. Firestore provides you with a different set of tools than real-time database. Okay, so Firestore, the way it works is it comes with a collection. It comes with the collection itself when you make it, and it's the newest database, kind of structure on Firebase. But for this semester, we've used real-time database, which is the older one. Again, lots of stuff out there like that. Okay, let's move on to today's topic now. Questions before we move on? Questions or thoughts about this? Right? Again, I want just to expose you to what this looks like, you know, for when it comes to data. All right, so for today, what are we doing? We want to talk about what Node is. And back in 2009, for those people who remember, the time frame is always a funny time. 2008, 2007, 2009. It's all the same time frame where all this kind of came into being, right? They started talking about a project called Node.js, which was using Ajax, which we've talked about this semester, you know, to be able to kind of respond to users' requests, but on the back end, which is kind of weird. So imagine having a headless, a kind of like using JavaScript with no index.html. That's what Node.js does. And for the most part, how does it do it? Well, it was based on Google's V8 engine, the same thing that came out of that particular year, 2008, 2009. Google came out with the V8 engine, which changed Google Chrome, which enabled faster operation of JavaScript. Once JavaScript became faster, it became viable for us to use it on the back end, right? As opposed to the front end, okay? So that's where it came from. And one thing was that Node.js was built on C. So it was actually compiled, it's a compiled language that made up of C and C++ now. You know, that's how Node has been created. Node, just to give you a bit of a story as well, the original creator of Node had a bit of a conflict with the committee that was making Node. And he originally went off and made his own project called io.js. Okay, that's what happened. And then for a long time, when we first started using Node, Node was like 0.12, 0.13, 0.14, 0.15. And we're like, holy crap, it's going so slow, right? And then he came back and they merged io.js with Node, and all of a sudden it was like Node 4.0. And I'm like, wait, what? 4.0, where how do we go from 0.18 to Node 4, right? And every year, I mean, you can see how fast it is now. We're at what, 19? I bet you we're even more than 19 at this point, 19 point something. Every month, they keep on coming up with another iteration of Node, another, you know, kind of stable version. And by the end of the year, you'll have an LTS, you know, a long-term, you know, kind of, you know, one that is in long-term stability, if you will, right? And it's a recommended version for Node. That's what they recommend. Every year they come up with a new one, and it's really going quickly. Let's talk about one thing that Node does. It does something different than PHP. Okay, so it's scalable and all that kind of stuff. Node is event-driven. All right. So one thing that we had with PHP, if you were using PHP before, you guys done PHP? Yes. So then you can see something. If I had a variable like output, and then I did a query, I can select star from users, and then I echo the output. You know, as an example, this is how I access a PHP database. You know, the select statement, you know, kind of is used right here. And what happens is, until I get a response from the database, all of my future iterations or anything else I want to do is blocked. I have to wait for synchronously. I have to wait for the database to respond before I do something. Okay, that's how old PHP would work, right? Which is bad. We didn't have at the time asynchronous connections, right? Remember JavaScript, the asynchronous nature of JavaScript, where, you know, the server is going to respond anytime it feels like. That's not how this works. This is like, it's synchronous. I'm waiting for my response. I'm not going to even step forward until I get a response back, because that's how PHP would work. It was blocking, and it blocked, and it would just wait and stay idle forever. One thing also that they did with PHP was, well, what about if I have, you know, multiple people accessing my PHP server? Their solution was to have a thread system where I had multiple threads. Every single time a new user came and accessed the server, they would make another thread. And I want you to think about a thread as another little subsystem for execution, almost like I'm making its own, I don't know, I'm thinking about, you know, what it works like. It's almost like I'm using another core for your processor. I'm splitting your processor into another process that's just sitting on the side here, right? So imagine every time I have a user, I make a new thread, and another one, and another one, and another one. and I have a very busy season like we're coming into now with Christmas, right? So now all of a sudden I have thousands of threads for a website, maybe tens of thousands of threads that are sitting there waiting for someone to access my database on my project, right? I have all these threads sitting there, and then we move out of being very, very busy. We're not Christmas anymore. We're into like, I don't know, March or something like that, and it's way less busy than Christmas. Now I have all of these threads that were created from before. Some of them got pruned, but I have a lot of threads just sitting there waiting, doing nothing. And the problem with multi-threading in this environment is it has a very high overhead, right? Dealing with all of these threads. So here's an example of how it would work. And let's take a look at an Apache server of the backend. So if you look at an Apache server, and that's the, kind of this dark teal or whatever it is color. I'm a guy, so I'm going to call it green for a second, but you can see that I have a number of requests per second. And what ends up happening is as I go forward, I have a number of requests, and the number of requests per second, the ability for me to handle those requests keeps going down, 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 as an example, with the number of concurrent connections. So the number of requests I can handle at one time, it becomes a bottleneck, right? So it comes lower, 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 lower until my server can possibly stop, all right, even with today's technology, right? How about Nginx? Nginx is what's running Node.js. Node.js runs on a single thread, all right? So there's only one thread. And what Node.js does, because Node.js is events, it's an event-driven system, just like JavaScript is event-driven, it's asynchronous, right? One thread is for everything. You have an event queue, and that event queue takes care of all requests. So you can see here that thousands of requests, and still from a request per second, it's still pretty stable. It only goes down very little, right, when it comes to that kind of stuff. And what this means is that it's just a better technology, right? And that's why we've seen over the years, PHP go down in terms of popularity, slowly, 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 right? And Nginx and Node going up, up, up in popularity, right? That's why people want you to know Node and Next.js and all this kind of stuff, because it is more viable for us long-term than to use something like a PHP server. PHP is old technology, even if they update it, even if you have a beautiful system like Laravel that layers on top of it, which is another framework that you can use. It's nice, but still has the same problems on the back end, no matter what you do, right? How about memory? How does that work with Node, right? Well, if we go to the next slide, you can see that here's Apache, right? So an old Apache system, the more concurrent connections you have, the higher and higher memory demands you have. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, memory in megabytes. We're just saying, I'm having 3,500 connections, but in a large environment where I have many thousands of connections, this is a huge problem. The more and more memory demands that I have for my connections, and that's each connection. Every single time I do something is a connection, right? Because I'm doing a round trip a lot of times. I'm going out to the server, getting information. You guys know about round trips with .NET and .NET Core. You go out and you come back. That's a round trip, and you keep doing that over and over again, right? So whereas Node.js doesn't matter how many connections, memory is the same because we only have one single thread. It doesn't matter, right? It's very, very simple in terms of memory consumption. So why is this awesome? It means that I have way better performance in general than what I would normally have with PHP. So this is the reason why we want to do Node and why we've been doing this whole, this revolution that's been happening since 2008. Remember, and it's also concurrent with over 7 years, they developed and matured Node from 2008 to 2015 until ECMAScript 2015, 2016, and all that stuff came out, right? And then you had full stack. Now I'm able to do a full stack development. I can do Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. I can do Mongo, Express, React, and Node. And it all happened around 2015. Alongside with TypeScript being developed and all this kind of stuff, this is where all the technologies went. And one day, I'm not going to have this conversation because a few years from now, we're going to forget how things were and how bad they were. And now, one thing that we haven't talked about this semester is, from a bleeding edge perspective, is WebAssembly, and how WebAssembly is becoming now the new thing that's starting to come out there, and server-side rendering, as opposed to client-side rendering like that what we've been doing right now. So that's Node, and why Node, right? Why do we choose Node? So one thing that Node comes with is a bunch of core modules. Okay, Node has, remember, we've been using NPM this whole time, right? NPM and Yarn is something we've had, right? We've been talking about, if you look at our project for the current project we have, our package.json defines a bunch of modules and dependencies that we use for our project, right? And you can see here that we have a lot, these are all third-party dependencies, third-party objects that we load in, right? Node has stuff that's built in, out of the box, right? And we should take a look at some of those modules right now. So what is Node and how to use it and all that stuff is where I'm going with this. So let's just kick up a new one of these. So if we go to nodejs.org, here's Node. You can see now that our current version is at 19.1, and our long-term support version is 18.12, 18.12.1, and it says recommended for most users. So you can see how it's really moving from one thing to the other. If you're actually going to look at the timeline for how things have moved, like I said, every year this is chomping through another iteration, and they really do make a lot of changes to Node every single month, right? Let's take a look at the documentation for Node. Again, this is on nodejs.org docs. Notice that there is an API. Remember the application programming interface? We just used one with Firebase. An application programming interface tells us how to use the system, right? That's what it is. And it offers up something called endpoints that we can use, right? Well, an application programming interface is also, well, what does Node offer us? Let's take a look at this one. So if I look at all the core modules, this is all the stuff for the most part that comes with Node. So for example, the OS module, the path module, the file system module, the globals module, all this stuff is built into Node. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to do a Yarn install. But what you do need to do is you need to do an include. You need to kind of, almost like you have to call up that module, because Node, one thing that you're going to know about Node is it is modular. In its very smallest form, Node is bare bones. It has nothing, right? And what you do is you attach or plug in modules, whether it's a core module or a third-party module, to make Node more usable. That's what it is, right? So Node, very bare bones, right? That's all it is. And we attach more things to it to make it nice to use, okay? But there's a lot of stuff that's built in, okay? A lot of built-in modules. So going back then to this, we have it, all these modules are pre-bundled, and we're going to use something like the require method, with JavaScript. Now, I want to say this. I want to talk about this too. Remember, we've been using ECMAScript module pattern this semester, right? We haven't used require, the keyword require, for anything, right? And you don't need to do it with Node either. And we're going to do that. We're going to be using TypeScript in Node, right, from the very beginning, right? So if you look here at the at our module pattern, so example, when I have a module, which is a component for us here in React, and I want to use the home component, I use import statements and I use export statements, right? That's what I do it. I create a module, and the module is a self-contained program, a self-contained file, and we import other files into it. We plug in functionality and we export that whole module so we can use it somewhere else, right? It's the same thing with Node, okay? Except the older version of Node used require as a keyword. It used something called the CommonJS module pattern, or CJS. That's what it was called. We're using the ECMAScript module pattern, okay? That's what we're using, okay? So the ECMAScript module pattern is now the most modern way we're doing it, and that's what we're going to see, okay? However, Rich may decide next semester to take you back to using require, because that is also very common out there. There's a lot of Node applications that have been written, and they're still using just JavaScript, plain old JavaScript, and the require keyword using CommonJS, okay? For us, because we're advanced people, you and I, right? We're going to use imports and exports. We're going to use TypeScript, okay, as we do stuff. All right, so that is Node core modules. Here's an example of what a core module might look like with the old pattern, okay? In the new pattern, instead of using require, we would just say import FS from FS. That's the only difference, okay, for this thing, right? Where FS is the file system module. The file system module allows us complete access to all the files on our server, okay? This is different than what we've had before. In the past, when it came to using something like a JSON file, we could only read from it. We couldn't write to it. Here, we have complete access to the backend, just like you would with .NET, okay? So you can do whatever you want. And the file system module is built right in, but it's very basic when you look at the file system module, what it gives you. I can read a file, yay. What type of file is it? We have to specify what type of file it is. UTF-8 as an example, in terms of the character set it uses. What about the MIME type? How does the file system handle a MIME type? MIME being the type of file. For example, is it JavaScript? Is it CSS? Is it an HTML file? What file are we looking at? Node.js doesn't handle that stuff. You have to tell it how to do stuff. At the very core level, the very low level, Node.js doesn't do that, right? You have to basically plug that functionality in and tell it. Otherwise, it's just a file. It's just data, okay? It doesn't know that it's a CSS file or an HTML file or anything else like that, okay? And so why am I telling you this? This is why they've come up with third-party modules like Express. Express is a third-party application. It's a third-party module that's layered on top of Node. Node is your server. Express is your third-party middleware. That's what it is. And when you hear the word middleware, you should think of it like this. It's a function that's in the middle of Node and you. Okay, that's what it is, okay? So Node is the very base level, and then there's some middleware function, some software that someone else has written, that's Express, and then it's you, the user. That's how it is, right? And it goes through that Express middleware so that you, the user, can see the view. Okay, that's for the most part how it works. Let's continue with these core modules. So third-party modules are like Express. So again, you can see this is the old pattern. Const Express is require Express. Again, for us, in your mind, you should always think to yourself, import Express from Express. That's all you have to think about. That's the difference, okay? Now, there is some setup we need to do with our project for us to make this work this way, okay? Because out of the box, it works like this with a require statement. It doesn't work with imports and exports out of the box. You have to change some stuff on the package.json file, which is what we're going to do, okay? And we have to change some stuff on the TypeScript file, which is what we're going to do, okay? So third-party modules add functionality. That's what they do. And the other thing that Node gave React and Node gave other things was the ability for you to require modules, files, just like React does. So React imports stuff. Well, that came from Node. Node started that whole process. How do I import? How do I connect modules together? How do I connect files with no index.html? Remember in the beginning with us, we had to use index.html as the manifest, the connection point for all the JavaScript files and CSS. We have no index.html on the back end. It doesn't exist, right? So how do we connect everything? We need some form of module system. And that's what this require keyword or CommonJS module pattern gave us at the time, right? Now, again, we don't use that. We use import and export. Okay, so that is the relative path, and you can also use absolute path if you really want to as well. I don't recommend that. Okay, and the reason why, by the way, I don't recommend this is because if you're putting this up on a server like render, you have no access to their files. It has to be relative path for render or someplace else you're putting it up, right? So yes, you could do this locally if you want to solve a problem temporarily, but you want to do something like this normally. All right, so again, I can make my own folders and everything else like we said before. So when we develop Node.js application, again, Node.js is your platform. Node.js is your bare level ability for you to create a server. We use NodeMon, or we use Light Server before. Remember Light Server? And Light Server is just basically a pre-bundled Node.js server on the back end that allows you to spin out your files. That's what it does. It's very, very bare bones, okay? Which is kind of what Node.js is. Okay. Here's an example of a Node.js server. Let's make this together in code. This is what part of our in-class exercise for this week is. Let's do this together, and we're going to configure everything to make this work with TypeScript as opposed to just JavaScript. Okay, let's do it. So I don't need this anymore. I'm going to make a brand new project here. Now, this is something that we're not going to use our content from last time so far. We're going to make a brand new folder here called week 12. Here's week 12. And week 12, okay, I'm just going to drag this in here, okay, and start off our brand new journey into Node, okay? Here's what we need for Node. We need a package.json file. How are we going to make this? Should I make this by myself with Node? What do you recommend? Now you've been using Node and NPM and all that stuff by yourself. How do I make it? Should I make my own package.json file? What do you think? No, hell no. We should use Yarn to do it, right? Because we already have everything installed. So we're going to use Yarn for this. Okay, so here I'm going to say Yarn init, right? And Yarn init is going to give us some questions. It's going to create the package.json file for us in a series of questions. So we're going to call this, in lowercase, please, COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester, and it's going to be week 12, and then press enter. The version number, let's keep it low. Let's go 0.01, and then press enter. All right, and the description is demo project for COMP2112 in the fall. You can be as complex as you want here. Fall 2022 semester at Georgian College. Okay, that's what it is. And well, of course, we'll say this is a Node demo project. Node is what we want to say. So Node.js demo project. Okay, entry point. It says index.js. Here's something else. With Node.js or with front-end technologies, again, it doesn't recognize TypeScript. We need to do a transpilation. We're going back to that. We're going to transpile from JavaScript to TypeScript. That is a step we need to make, right? And so Node also recognizes only JavaScript. So here at the back end, at least for now, and here at the back end, we're just going to say, what is our entry point? We can call our entry point whatever we want. Index is very common. Server is another very common one, or app. Those are three entry points I've seen very many times. For us, let's make it server.js because we're going to make a server today. Okay, our repository URL we don't have yet. Enter. Our author, that's your name. Enter. MIT license is fine. Enter. Private, no. Enter. And now we've got our first thing, which is our package.json. There it is. And our package.json is a very basic thing that we need to put together because we want to keep track of all of our modules we're going to add into this project. Okay, even if there's no modules, we need this. We need a server.js file now, a server.js file. Let's make it. So, but we're going to use TypeScript. And I want to do the TypeScript compilation part 2. So the second file we want in our project is not a file, but rather a tsconfig.json file. Let's do it. Make brand new file. And we're going to call this a tsconfig.json. We've done this before. We're going to say that the compiler options, so we're going to say compiler options here, right? So here it is. Compiler options, right, is module is not common, it's going to be common JS for the module type. By the way, if you go like this, take it away and press Control space, it'll give you all the options, right? We want common JS. That's the one we want, okay? The target, right, is ECMAScript 2022. That is the target language version that we're using. We also want to, kind of make source maps is true. That's what we want. We're going to be excluding node modules here from transpiling. We don't want to transpile any node modules ever. So we're going to include this as in part of the exclude. I'm going to include other options too. Like for example, I want to remove comments. I don't want, when I transpile, I don't need my comments transpiled too. I want to make it so that we're always strict. So we're going to say that always strict is true. I want no implicit any returns. So I'm going to say no implicit any for our option. These are all options we're going to put together, right? I also want to do strict null checks. So strict null checks is also going to be true. And I also want strict function types. I want that too. So why am I doing this? I'm getting TypeScript to give me as much information of what's going wrong as possible. That's what I want, okay? And I'm being pretty strict when I'm doing this kind of stuff. I also want strict bind, call, apply, okay? Let's make that true. And strict property initialization. I want that as true, right? I want no implicit any this. No implicit any. Or no implicit this is what it is. No implicit this. And I also want always strict to be on. And no implicit returns. No implicit returns. So now this is different where some languages like implicit returns. For example, in Kotlin, if you only have one thing that you're returning, then you don't have to use the return keyword, okay? Here, we're not going to allow that. We're going to say that you must use the return keyword with no implicit returns, okay? That's what that means. I want, to make this all work, I want ES module interop to be true as well. What this does is it says, I want, instead of common JS module with the require keyword, I want to use import and export. That's what this is going to do, okay? I also want to emit decorator metadata, right? Which is going to allow me to work better with Node and TypeScript. I also want, for now, experimental decorators to work as well. And I want the module resolution pattern to be Node. Okay, that's what it has to be. And that, my friends, is our compiler options. It's a one-time cost. We don't have to do this again, ever. We're not monkeying with this thing again, right? This is just our standard structure when it comes to how we set things up so that TypeScript will work for us, not against us. Okay. All right. Let's do the next part, which is let's make our server.js. Okay.
Sorry, can you please slow down? Just give me just 1 second.
Sure. So again, this is configuration. All we're doing is configuring our app before we go. And we're going to use the same configuration, even if we make our app an Express app on the back end, we're going to use the same configuration because this is what links everything together on the back end for us. Okay. Questions? You're yeah. How do you know? There's no link. There's no link, but what you can do is you can use some recommendations from typescriptlang.org, right? So this is where you can get it from. So things you absolutely need that must be here to make this work, okay? You need these two. This is a must-have. These two must be there, okay? The rest, strict null checks, and those are all my things. Those are things that I want, all this stuff, right? And up until about here, this is all nice to have stuff. This stuff in here, all this bulk of stuff, this is nice to have. But the first two and the last four are absolutely required for you to make it work properly. You cannot go further than this without this stuff, right?
Is it important what things comes first?
No.
No. Okay.
Nope. It doesn't matter which, because all it is configuration. It's going to spit out the configuration on the back end. Save. Are you okay, Elena? Number one. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So now that we have this, let's make our server.ts file. All right, so I'm going to go and make a brand new file called server.ts. And because it's a TypeScript file, it needs some stuff. And I'm going to refer back to our PowerPoint, which is something that I want you guys to look at, okay? So let's think about this. I want to require a built-in module called HTTP. HTTP is going to allow us to create our own server. We're not going to use require, we're going to use import. Let's do it. So I'm going to say import, right, HTTP from, and then it's going to be HTTP. That's what I want. And I'm not getting any code hinting for this. It's giving me an error. It's going, I don't know what you talk of, Tom, right? Why? We never used any code hinting technologies in our package.json file. Remember, we have to do a yarn add at types node. That's all we have to do. And watch this error disappear. Let's do it. So save this file. And we're going to go back here and go yarn add, right, at types node. And if you do that, right, then that error will go away. Okay, eventually. There it is. Make sense? Why? Because now if I hover over HTTP, I want to try and find out what this is, I get all this information, right? It says, hey, look, you're using the HTTP module, right, to make your server. And it even gives you some information like how to do it. Sure. So all I did was I did a yarn add at types node. And that added in the type definition library for Node.js. It added it into the package.json file. That's what it did. Just this file, this line. Okay, so here's our package.json. You can see here now, right, that it did this as dependencies. Now, you could argue that this is not a application dependency. It's us. It's a developer dependency because we don't really need this, right? To make that we can use just JavaScript, right? I'm going to argue against that, saying, you know what? Without this, thing, we can't use TypeScript. So, in my opinion, at types node is a project dependency for us to get going. We can't do it without it. We can't program it. It'll give us an error all the time, right? Next. So now that we've done that and we don't have any more errors here, let's continue with the PowerPoint stuff. All right. So I want to do all this. So I want to see if I can get code hinting on this. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to say HTTP dot, and then I want now, you can see I'm getting nice code hinting. Create server is what I'm doing. And it tells me I need a listener. These are the things I need. I need a listener. I need some kind of, other things as well. And here we can use, again, lambda expression, or in our case, it's fat arrow syntax. That's the kind of function we need. Or we can put it out the old way. So the old way would be function, right? And request response. We could do this too, right? This is the old way. Okay. The new way is this, which is using an arrow function. Okay, that's the new way. We're going to use the new way. Okay. And inside of our create server, like it says here, we're going to do a res write head. Okay, a res write head. So let's see how that's going to give us some code hinting. So if I do res dot, and if I go write head, you can see that that works. And if I open this up, it tells me what it is. It says, oh, it sends a response header to the request, and the status code is a 3-digit HTTP status code like a 404. I'm telling the server that what response I want to write. This is the server. The server is spitting out its status code. Instead of you waiting for the server to give you status code, I am the server. I'm making my server. It is giving you the status code. And I can give whatever status code I want. In this case, we're saying, let's write out 200, which is, what does 200 mean again? All okay, right? We talked about this. And then I want some kind of options to go along with it. And the options here are the content type that I want to write out, which is text plain. So again, I'm going to say content type. And then it's text plain, right? Now, one thing that I would love to do is if content type and any of this stuff here would be, if we had any kind of code hinting for this, right? If I press Control Space, wouldn't it be nice if we have content type like that's in here? Can't I do that? And unfortunately, it does not, right? It'd be nice if we had it, but we don't. We can't do content type, and I want to write that in. We don't have that, right? So we're going to write it on our own. But it'd be nice if we had it, right? And I think this is the next level. If they can give us that kind of stuff for any of this, that'd be awesome. So text plain is what we want here. So text plain. Now, one thing to notice is it is kind of case sensitive. So you should probably put something like this. And that's the head of our response that we're going to write, text plain. Okay. And this is the thing that we're doing. So this is our first thing. We're writing a head that says everything is okay. And next we're going to res and then end. And if I look and see what that is, it says it calling the writable and method signals that no more data will be written to the writable object. And the optional chunk and encoding arguments allow one final addition of chunk data. So here we're stopping. We're not doing anything else. We're just going to give a message that's going to say something like hello world. Okay. So we're actually, this is the actual server that we're making. Okay. That's all the server has in it. Now, one thing we can do is here in the PowerPoint slide, it shows .listen. This is an event or method chaining. Instead of doing .listen, let's make something called a server. So we'll say let server equal to this. And our server now, you can see if I hover over, it says server is a type of HTTP server. That's the type, right? And what I can do is I can say something like server.listen. And I can listen on port 3000 or whatever port I want. I can put in the port number in here, 3000, okay? And also, again, what the host name is if I want. So the host name would be localhost as an example. I can put that in there too if I want to. So I can put something like localhost, right? That's the host name, followed by some kind of backlog number or an event listener, right? That's something I can put in here as well. For now, we're just going to put in localhost and see what it does, okay? And here we can also put a little console command, but listen also can take a callback function, right? There's a listener, a callback function that we have too. So listen can take that and something else. And if I try doing that, if I say localhost and it takes some kind of callback function, can I do that? Can I do something that looks like this, where I say something like a console log, you know, something like listening. Let's do a template string. Template string would look like this. Listening on port, and then we're going to do injection, right? Remember we did injection like this. We can say a port 3000. What if we defined the port number up here instead of putting it hard coded? Let's say, for example, I said port, which is a number, is equal to 3000. What if I did that and I use that port number here, right? Instead of hard coding it, and I pass in the port number here, whatever that port happens to be. So listening on port, whatever, and then, right, that gives me some information about what we can do. Let's see how this works. So save. Are we done? Is there something that's missing that we haven't done? It's critical, by the way. Is there something missing that we haven't done to make our applications to run? Well, here's something we haven't done. We haven't transpiled, right? So we have to do that. So Control-Shift-B, transpile, Control-Shift-B allows us to transpile to JavaScript, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to spit out, if everything goes well, it's going to spit out a .js file. That's what it's going to make. Remember, we cannot operate a .ts file. We can only use a .js file. So Control-Shift-B, and I'm going to put that on the, thank you, Tyler. Control-Shift-B is the thing that we need to transpile, Control-Shift-B. Okay, so now that we've transpiled, there's a couple ways to start this off. We could do an npm, you know, as an example, and we could start, or we can download a little module that helps us out, right? So how would I run this thing, this server.js? How do I run server.js, right? Well, let's try this out and see how that works too. I'm just gonna load in another terminal for this, right? So if I was gonna run it manually, I would just do something like, you know, let's say, for example, I wanna run this, right? So I would call, let's say npm or yarn, and maybe could I call the server.ts, server.js? Can I do that? Is that enough? Well, it doesn't do it, right? So that's not it. Should I run node? So if I say something like node server.js, is that going to do it? And then now you can see it is doing that exact same thing, node, right? We don't want this to happen every single time. We run a run script. We want something that tells us what to do, node server.js. So let's stop this, Control C to stop. Okay, Control C. And I want in my package.json file, to add another little thing here. Manually, we're going to do it in the package.json file. And typically I want it before my dependencies. You can put this anywhere you like though, to be honest. So I want to add in a brand new thing, Control Space, try Control Space here, where I want to run in a scripts. Here's my scripts. And I want to call this the run script. So I want to call it a run script, right? So what does the run script look like? You know, as an example, the scripts that we can run are going to be basically that are going to just allow us to, or let's call it start. Instead of run, we'll call it start. So notice that if I go here, start is an option. And I can just simply say node server.js. So what this is going to do for us is instead of me having to, I'm just going to put the scripts down here like this. Right. By the way, scripts have to also terminate like this. No problem. Yeah, this is pretty good, actually. So I can put as many scripts as I want. And what a script does is it allows me to say yarn start. And then it'll run, it'll just call this little function. So this is great for doing things like testing, building, transpiling, whatever you want to do. You can do that right here. And it can do a lot of it for you. Okay. So let's try it again. Now that we have this modified version of our package.json, and let's try it again. And this time, instead of doing node server.js, we'll do a yarn start and see what happens. Right? There's our port listening on port 3000. Are you with me? No? Okay, let's fix it. Before we move on, let's exit out of here. Let's go through because some people might have trouble too. So again, going back to first of all, do you have this? Okay, that's the first part. Now, part two.
I don't have port 3000. I have port in brackets, and that's it.
Right. So here's what you need to do. So make sure you put this line in here. Line, let port number is 3000. Right. And by the way, make sure it is a template string you're using, backtick, okay, not question marks, or sorry, quotation marks, okay? Remember, template strings, we can inject stuff directly into template strings. We don't want to use quotation marks here, a regular string, okay? That's what we're not doing here. All right, so let's go back and let's go back to that, our stuff down here and try it again. So if I do yarn start, it should work now. Again, up online before we move on, because we need this. Are you with me?
Can you please wait 1 second? I try to do the same.
Sure. Kyle's good. Kyle, I know I'm going slow for you, buddy. Wait for me, okay? Okay. Thanks, Tyler. And Elena, let us know when you're ready to go. So I don't want to move forward unless everyone's on the same page, please. I will talk though. Here's what I'm going to talk about. Here's a problem. What if I want to change something, right? And by the way, if I wanted to see my project running, go onto your own browser. I'm not going to do that here because I don't want to block Elena or someone else from doing this, right? Go into your own browser and put in localhost 3000 and try and see what you get. Okay.
Can you please put this code to the somewhere as mistake? I cannot find it.
This code?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
There's the code. It's up on chat. So if I do that, if I go to my browser, let's go to my browser here. And if I put in my browser localhost 3000, I'm going to get this, hello world. Right now I'm using a dark mode. Doesn't matter. But you'll see that this is it. So what happened? Right? What happened? How did this hello world come up to be? Right? Well, let's track it a little bit. Let's trace it and see what's happening here. And I'm going to push this to the side here. And I'm going to take this and push it to the other side so we can see it side by side again. Okay, so here is our project right now. Our project just does this. It says, make a little server first. What is this doing? if we think about what this is doing. When I make a server like this, what am I doing? I want you to think about it now. Okay, don't look at this part. If this line 10 to line 12 didn't exist, what am I doing here? Just this part. I know it sounds like easy to answer. You're like, Tom, you're making a server. Correct. But actually, I want you to think about it further. This is JavaScript. It doesn't matter whether it looks like TypeScript or not. What am I making? I am constructing an object. That's what I'm doing. I am constructing an object. When I've constructed this object, it's made. As soon as the object is made, it's not going to change, ever. So when I make my server, it's made once and for all. When I instantiate it, and how am I instantiating my server? Node server.js. As soon as I call node and server.js, I instantiate that object. Is there something here that changes that object? No, which means if I was to change this while this is running, if I was to change this to, instead of saying hello world, if I say something like goodbye, right, as an example here, right, and if I press save here, even though it's listening and transpiling, it's going to do nothing over here if I refresh, nothing. Why? My object that this server was built in has not changed, because my server, which is something that's running down in here, is still running with the old instance of the original object I made. Let me say that again. I make an instance of an object here for the first time. When I do this, I'm creating an instance of an object. Let me write this down. Creating an instance of the server object. Right? When I make this instance of the server object, it's immutable. It cannot change, right? The only way that this server object can change is if I restart my server and reinitialize everything. So I need to go down in here and restart the server, and then it'll say goodbye. Watch. If I do that, if I press Control-C, stop the server, and then clear, and do a yarn start, and press enter, now it restarted. We need to refresh manually over here, and when we do, it's going to show goodbye. If I change it back right now, and I change it to something else, it's not going to change this, no matter how many times I refresh, because it's immutable. Once I create that object, it's there for life. And now you're going to say, wait a minute. How is that usable in the server? But remember what we're doing. We're not making you change the server itself. We're making you change routes. We're making you get information. We're making you read data. That's not changing the server. We've configured the server in a certain way. We've made our object what we want it, right? Now we've made a very simple object. Our simple object right here doesn't do much. It just literally just goes hello world or goodbye. That's all it does right now. But yay, you've made your first server. This is what a server is like. It listens forever until something changes, okay? Now, this is not usable, guys. I'm sorry, but doing a yarn start, and I have to rerun and restart my server. What if I forget? I might forget forever how this works, right? This is no good. I need another tool to help me, right? And let's go back to hello world. I want to do it so that when I go hello world and press save, and if I refresh, it's going to show me hello world again. I don't want it to. I want this to automatically restart. Now, let's talk about a couple of options here, okay? Let's first stop the server.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Can I ask you why it shows me error command failed with code number 1?
I'm not
For
sure.
documentation about this comment.
This comment here?
No,
Is
I
that-
did like you explain everything, but it doesn't work. It doesn't
This doesn't work
start.
for you. This doesn't work for you. So did you transpile?
Yes, 2 times.
Did you see over here? Do you see the code that's over here? When you did you see a server.js?
Yes, I see.
Okay, so does this look like this? Does it look like what it should look like? Something like that looks like this. If it doesn't look like this, or if you haven't transpiled, that's one thing. But remember that the server.ts file is just going to be setting up the server.js file at the back end. That's all it's going to do. I'm going to push this to GitHub, and then you can compare your code with my code, Elena. That's what I want you to do. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So let's do it. So let's do a new GitHub repository here. I'll say git init, git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say initial commit. And I want to push it, but I don't have a repository. Let's make one that's here. I'll say github.com/Georgian College. And I want to make a brand new repository. Let's do one for this week. Make it public. And I'm going to grab the last 3 lines of code like before, copy them, and go back into Visual Studio Code, right click and paste. Wonderful. So now you have everything. Please go to my repository, which is, I'm going to paste this in the chat so you can compare your code with my code. Worst case, Elena, just download my stuff and go from there. Worst case. That is the worst case because I want you to understand. Did you add the start script in the package? I did. If you look at the package.json now, this is my package.json. All right, so that way you can see everything that I have. Okay. All right, so that is where we're at right now. Let's continue a little bit longer and we'll take a short break. So yeah, I have this, but it'd be nice if I can restart automatically. In the past, what I would need to do is download a new global module. Let's do that together. It's called NodeMon. NodeMon. Same thing. Right. So it's a supervisor. Yeah. So what it is we're going to say yarn. Actually, let's use npm. npm install NodeMon -g. Okay. It's a global module that we're going to add here. Right. And the global module NodeMon, what it does is it's going to allow us to restart our server, right, when we're running it. Okay. So npm install NodeMon -g. This is not something that's local to the project. It's for all projects. When I use the -g, it means global. I want a global installation of this project. Now, instead of using yarn start, I don't want to use yarn start. I want to use NodeMon like this. If I just use NodeMon by itself and press enter, now it's going to run the project and it's going to look like this. So why is this awesome? Why is this awesome? Because if I change the server now, anything in the server, it's going to restart it for me. I don't have to think about restarting the server anymore. That's a pain in the ass for me, right? Honestly. And it's another point of failure for my development process, right? Because what if I forget to transpile? Oh man, that's why we have the watch task. What if I forget to restart the server? I'm going to go, it's not working. This isn't working. Why isn't this working? Well, there's 2 possibilities now. You didn't restart the server or you didn't transpile. Those are the 2 possibilities that they didn't, that's why it's not working. Even if your code is identical to my code, if you didn't transpile and you don't restart the server somehow, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to work. Okay, so it's 2 points of failure now. We want to take care of those points with some kind of automatic stuff. All right. Now, how does this work? Now that I have NodeMon working, right? And if I pull up if I go to kind of the left here, and let's just move to here. Here's my goodbye, right? If I refresh, you're going to see that it's hello, right? If I change this automatically, if I change this to goodbye, or I'll say, how about hello? Let's change it from hello from COMP2112, right? If I do that and press save, and if I go here and refresh, it's hello from COMP2112, right? Why? Look, it restarted the server for me down here. It did that. Anything I change here and I save, it restarts the server, right? This is a beautiful thing. This is a good way to work. However, I want to mention that in the latest version of Node, right, they have a watch task that's built into Node that you can use as well. All right. So if I look at, if I go here to Node.js -w, right, which is watch, right? If I look at that, if I look at that, it's going to show you that there's probably going to be a watch task. How about we just type in watch task? That's not really going to give me the nice link watch, right? So there is a file system. It says for, so as of, I think version 19.1, which is the version of Node. Now, here's something else we have to consider. What version of Node are we using locally? This is depending on the Node version. And it says as of 19.1 documentation, right? Well, you know, it also has the watch task that I can kind of put in when I'm running it, right? So if we search for it, I'm just going to talk about this as an option, right? What does this look like? Because the API is not, it's kind of trying to get you not to use NodeMon anymore. Because here it is. At the time that we did it, right, we can do a watch for the file itself. But when I run it, the latest version of Node can actually have a -W as well. Let's try this out. So if I Control-C out of this, now what we want to do is do a couple of things to check this out. I want to see what my Node version is. So Node ---- version. And I'm running 19.0. Right? Here's 19.0. I want that watch task. I think it's an amazing thing. I don't need NodeMon anymore, right? So it's supposed to have, you know, it built in. How do I switch my Node versions? Remember? Way back at the beginning, NVM. Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Right? So NVM exists too, right? So if I do one of these, if I do something like NVM list, you're going to see that I have 19.0.0 currently installed. 19.1, this is a new thing, Andres, automatically watches for you if you want. You can set up a watch task. If you don't need a supervisor or some kind of NodeMon to do it for you, it'll do it for you right away, right? That's one less thing we have to worry about. So let's see if we can change our, you know, our thing. So what I want to do is if you look at NVM, and if you look at help, remember we want to do an NVM install. And we want to say NVM install latest, right, is what we want to do, right? So if I did that, if I do NVM install latest, it's going to download version 19.1. There it is. Now, warning, if I switch to version 19.1, all the things I've downloaded and installed for 19.0 are gone. What I mean by that is NodeMon no longer there. You know, anything I downloaded from before, TypeScript, no longer there. I have to do some configuration when I switch over. I have to do that. Okay. So let's do that outside of here. I want to use, is it removed? It's not removed now. If I do a NVM list, right, you can see that it's here, right? But what it does is it keeps all of Node into its own folders, right? So that means if I install some modules for Node version 1, and then if I install modules for another version, they don't conflict, right? Which means we have to do some reinstallation, okay, at the end of the day. First, let's not work here. Let's close down Visual Studio Code, please, because we don't want to do this. We want to work in some kind of command prompt with administrative privileges, I recommend. Okay, if I run with command prompt with administrative privileges, I want to issue the following command. So first of all, let's do an NVM list. You can see that it's here. And I want to do an NVM use, and I want to specify the version 19.1.0. It's going to switch to 19.1.0, right? If I try to type in NodeMon here, it's going to go, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Even though we just installed NodeMon, it's not going to work. Why? It's a different Node version. We have to do it again, right? So let's install the stuff we need. npm install TypeScript. We do need that. -G, please. We do need that again, okay? And then I want to say npm install. We'll have NodeMon in there just as a backup, okay? -G, just in case my funny idea about the watch task isn't working, okay? npm install NodeMon -G. Okay, there we go. Now, if I do a list, if I do an NVM list, I have 19.0 still there. We can always go back. right? But I don't need it. Now that I'm using 9.19.1, it gives me the latest version of Node. Let's get rid of 19.0. So we can do an MVM uninstall 19.0.0 and press enter. And it's going to remove the previous version of Node from your system. This is good cleanup for us because we don't need to use multiple versions. Now, if you are somebody who is trying to connect to somebody's older system that had an older version of Node, guys, then you would want to keep multiple versions of Node in there and switch to whatever system you need so that you're compatible with the other person's website, right? That's why we use MVM, because if I use my version of Node and the other version of Node is older, and chances are it will be, right? I'm going to have problems. I'm going to have a functionality that doesn't work the same way on both sides, and it's going to complain. You're going to get weird errors. We don't do that kind of stuff. So that's why we remove stuff here, but in reality, we'd probably keep it. All right, let's go back to here, to my Visual Studio Code. Yes. TypeScript and NodeMon. That's it. Yeah, just as a backup. All right, so how do I use this now? How do I use my watch task for Node? Well, my thinking would be something like this: Node, and then the name of the file, server.js, and then -w would be nice to have, right? This is something that I want to do. And look at that. Look at that, my friends. It's now working with a w -w, but does it restart? That's the thing that we want to avoid. We want to avoid restarting, right? Does it work? If it doesn't, if I refresh, you can see that that's cool. Let's change this and see what happens. If I change hello world or hello from COMP2112 to hello world, does it work? Did it pick up my thing? Or is there another command that I need to use? Save. And if I save, it should restart, right? And if I refresh, does it save? No. So this is clearly not the command we need to use. It'd be nice if this was the way it worked. Node server.js -w. What about if it was, if we did a node help, right? Oops, node help. I want to do a help, right, for node. And let's make this maximized so we can see it here for a second. And let's see all the stuff it has to. Let's see all the stuff it says here for switches and things like that. So actually, I'll do the same thing again. Let's just clear. We'll do a node -- help. Sorry, I want to make sure that we can see everything. All right, so let's take a look here. So there is a -- watch that I have to use, not -w. Tom, you're so silly. You should have used -- watch. Why don't they have a -- w, right? That's what I want, right? It says I want it to run in watch mode. That's what I need to do, -- watch. That's the new thing now. Okay, so let's clear this up. And we'll do it again. Node server.js -- watch. Is that the way you do it? Let's see. We know it's there. We just need to make it work. Well, you know why it doesn't work? It could be the order that we want to make it work. I broke your terminal? Okay, good. Let's try this again. What if I do node -- watch like this? It says watch requires a specific file. Node -- watch. And then it says that I need a file. What if I said something like server.js? Do I have to say the file that I need? Right? It says experimental warning. Watch mode is experimental feature. This feature could change at any time. Use node -- trace warnings to show you where the warning was created. No, we don't need to do that. We know it's experimental because it's brand new, guys, like I said to you. So if I did this and do this, this is the watch task. So you have to put watch first, server.js, okay? And let's see if we do this. So if I press refresh, it's good. What if I change things? I want to see what happens here with this one. If I go to goodbye, does it change? Goodbye with 2. And if I press save, right? And if I refresh, it doesn't work, right? So to me, although it's neat, oh, I'm not transpiling. Control-Shift-B. Control-Shift-B for transpiling. Remember I said One of two possibilities for failure, right? Either I'm not transpiling, right? Look, it's restarted. Haha, it worked. Right, so that means if I refresh now, it should say goodbye. If I go back to hello, let's try this. Save. It should restart again, theoretically. And if I refresh, yeah, it's still flaky, flaky. But it should work. It should definitely work if you transpile. So that's why I said, download, install NodeMon as a backup. But I wanted to show you that experimental features exist and that the watch task, they're looking at that. They're saying, why should I need a third party to do this if I can write it in for Node, right? And I don't think I did anything wrong. It's just, I don't think it's watching properly, right? Because otherwise it would work. I would refresh and this would be restarting the server, right? Or do I have to do it manually? No. Okay, so we'll keep using NodeMon. That's why I downloaded NodeMon in the first place, huh? Come on. What? Control-Shift-B. Watch. Okay. Thank you. If yours works, I'm happy. Then mine's going to work. Mine's going to work if yours works. Let's go back to this. And let's do the same thing. We'll say node watch. Good. And then refresh. And let's change this back to goodbye. I want to see that it works. So why? Because it's one less thing to download and use, right? Goodbye. Couple of asterisks. That's good. It worked. Refresh. And if I go hello, it should work again. Hello, save. It worked. Refresh. So now the great thing is, here's an amazing thing, right? We don't want to do this command manually if it's working, right? We don't want to do this command manually. We want to build this command into the watch command that we did, right? This right here, right? Node -- watch and then the file name, right? We want to build that into our package.json, right? Because here's our package.json. We'll take a short break after this. Let's change this to start, and we're going to say node -- watch server.js, right? Because isn't that better? So we never have to think about that again, right? It's always built in. It's in watch mode, right? And if I go back now and if I do yarn start, then it should start in watch mode theoretically. Oh yeah, yarn is not installed. We forgot to install yarn too. Let's do that. So I'll say yarn, I'll say npm install yarn -g, please do that, or else yarn was not going to work anymore. Because we removed it, we killed it, right? So let's try that again. Yarn start. Hey, in watch mode, that's what I want, right? Now there's some things I like about NodeMon. NodeMon tells me things like reading and writing. It gives me some feedback that this doesn't give me yet, okay? But I think one day it's going to. I think they're really working on this, and they're making it so that it restarts automatically. Okay, guys, we're sitting at 9:30. This is a great place to take a short break, get some water, and do a washroom break, and we'll come back and we'll improve our little server because right now it does nothing. It literally just hello world. That's all it does. All right, so we'll come back in that. So I'll stop.